Lila had always known a quiet life. She lived in a small orphanage on the edge of the city, a place where laughter sometimes echoed through the halls, but mostly lingered as a distant memory. The rooms were plain, with worn-out furniture and walls that had seen many children come and go over the years. Lila's bed was small, and she had learned to keep her belongings neat and simple. There was no room for much, and there was no need for much, at least that was what everyone told her. Yet, Lila felt a constant emptiness inside her, a space where her family should have been. She was small for her age, with soft brown hair that fell in gentle waves around her face, and eyes that seemed to carry more sadness than a child should ever have to hold. Despite her quiet nature, there was a spark in her that could not be extinguished. Lila had always loved music. Not the kind played on a radio or sung by famous voices on television, but the kind that came from the piano she had first touched when she was barely old enough to sit on its bench. Her fingers were small, but they moved with a natural grace that amazed anyone who watched. Music had always been her companion, the one thing that made the world feel a little less lonely. Every day in the orphanage followed a predictable pattern. Breakfast in the morning, chores, lessons, and sometimes playtime if the weather allowed. Lila often found herself slipping away during these hours to the music room, a small corner with a dusty piano that had been there as long as anyone could remember. She would sit, let her fingers brush over the keys, and let her imagination carry her away. The notes were her friends, her comfort, the only way she could express what she felt inside. When she played, she was not alone anymore. Though Lila had never met her mother in person for a long time, the thought of her was always with her. She had been told stories about her mother from letters that occasionally arrived, scribbled in shaky handwriting and full of love and regret. Her mother had been ill, unable to care for her properly, and had made the heart-wrenching choice to send Lila to the orphanage where she would be safe and fed. Those letters were Lila's treasure. She would read them over and over, holding them close, imagining her mother's voice and warmth. Music, somehow, had become a way to connect to her mother, a way to send feelings that could not be spoken or mailed. At the orphanage, Lila had friends, but not many. Most children were busy with their own struggles, and many had lost hope in the small joys that life could offer. Lila was different. She had a quiet strength, a resilience that shone through in small moments. When she smiled, it was soft but genuine. When she laughed, it was rare but filled with a light that touched those around her. The staff at the orphanage often noticed how she would sit at the piano for hours, sometimes with tears rolling down her cheeks, and wondered what thoughts could be running through the mind of such a young girl. Little did they know, those tears were not just sadness. They were love, longing, and hope wrapped in every note she played. One chilly morning, as the sun barely peeked over the rooftops, Lila woke up earlier than usual. She had dreamt of her mother again. In the dream, her mother smiled at her, weak but full of love, and whispered words that Lila could not quite remember upon waking. She felt a strange determination as she got ready for the day. Something inside her had shifted. Music was no longer just an escape. It was becoming a mission, a purpose. Breakfast was quiet. Lila ate slowly, listening to the clatter of dishes and the murmur of children talking about their plans for the day. She watched them, noticing how some were careless with their time, how others were already burdened with worries far beyond their age. Lila felt a mix of envy and sadness. She wanted to be carefree like them, yet she knew her heart was tethered elsewhere. Her thoughts drifted to the letters again, and she pressed her hand against her chest as if she could feel her mother's heartbeat through the thin paper. After chores and lessons, Lila found her way to the music room as usual. The piano, though worn and slightly out of tune, welcomed her like an old friend. She placed her small hands on the keys and began to play a soft, gentle melody. It was a tune she had created herself, one that captured her feelings of longing and love. As she played, the room seemed to disappear. She could feel the presence of her mother as though the music was a bridge connecting them across the distance. Her fingers moved with a grace that surprised even her, and for a moment, the world felt right. The orphanage had its rules, of course. Children were expected to behave, to follow schedules, and to not waste time with distractions. Music, however, was considered a luxury, something that could soothe or entertain but not something to change a life. Lila didn't care about rules. She knew the power of what she could create with her hands. She played for hours, imagining that her mother could hear her, imagining that each note could bring her closer to the one person she longed to see. Outside, the city moved on without notice of the small struggles inside the orphanage. People hurried to work, cars honked, and life carried on. But inside, Lila created her own world, a world full of emotion, color, and sound. The piano sang under her touch, and the air seemed to vibrate with every note. Sometimes, staff would peek into the music room and see her absorbed, tears on her cheeks, and they would smile softly, understanding that this music was something beyond simple skill. It was a story, a soul speaking. Even in her loneliness, Lila found moments of connection. Other children would sometimes wander in, curious about the music, and sit quietly to listen. They didn't understand the depths of what she felt, but they could sense the emotion, the honesty, the raw beauty of it. And for Lila, that was enough. Music could reach hearts in ways words never could, and she had faith that it could one day reach her mother's heart as well. As the day ended, and shadows stretched across the orphanage halls, Lila returned to her small room, tired but fulfilled. She lay down on her bed, clutching the letters to her chest, and closed her eyes. In the darkness, she could still hear the melody she had played, like a soft echo of hope. She imagined her mother hearing it, smiling, feeling a little lighter despite the illness. That thought was enough to carry her into sleep. Though life was quiet and often difficult, Lila carried within her a spark that could not be dimmed. She was small, an orphan in a big world, yet her heart was full of love, and her music was a language that could speak louder than any words. Every day, she nurtured that gift, unaware that the simplest melody she could play might one day hold the power to change a life, to reach across the pain and the distance, and to save the one person she loved more than anything. One bright morning, as sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the orphanage, Lila was quietly practicing her melody. The notes floated in the air, soft and gentle, carrying all the feelings she had bottled up inside. She had almost lost herself in the music when a sudden knock on the door startled her. The caretaker, a kind but serious woman who always watched the children closely, entered with a letter in hand. Lila noticed a small group of adults following her, their eyes warm but expectant. The caretaker spoke gently, "Lila, these people want to speak with you. They have something important to ask." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what this could be about, and the curiosity mixed with nervousness made her hands tremble. She nodded quietly, following them into a bright room she had never been in before. The walls were lined with pictures of music events, trophies, and smiling faces of children performing. At the center, a small piano gleamed under the sunlight, almost inviting her to sit and play. One of the adults, a woman with a warm smile and a clipboard in her hands, knelt slightly to meet Lila's gaze. "Hello, Lila. We've heard about your talent," she said softly. "There's going to be a special event tomorrow for children who are sick and their families. We were wondering if you could perform a simple melody for them." Lila froze. She didn't know what to say. Her music had always been private, something she played in the quiet corners of the orphanage. Now, she was being asked to play in front of people she didn't know. She looked down at her hands and then back at the woman. "A simple melody?" she whispered. "Yes," the woman replied kindly. "Nothing complicated. Just play what feels right." Lila's mind raced. A performance? In front of an audience? She had never imagined anything like this. The thought of people watching her made her stomach twist into knots. Yet a small spark of excitement flickered inside her. Maybe this was her chance to do something meaningful, something that could reach out beyond herself. She nodded slowly, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. The adults smiled, sensing her agreement, and left her to prepare. Lila walked back to her usual spot in the orphanage, but everything felt different now. The music room no longer felt like just a quiet retreat. It had become a stage, a place where her emotions might be seen and heard by others. That night, Lila could hardly sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with thoughts about the performance. What if she made a mistake? What if people didn't like her music? But then she remembered her mother, weak and far away, and a wave of determination washed over her. Maybe if she played with her heart, the music could carry something more than notes. It could carry love, hope, and strength. The next morning arrived quickly. Lila dressed carefully, choosing her simplest outfit so as not to draw unnecessary attention. The staff at the orphanage walked with her to the venue, offering words of encouragement. "Just be yourself, Lila," one of them whispered. "Play what you feel." That's all anyone could ever ask. The room where the event was held was larger than anything Lila had seen. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, and rows of chairs were filled with children and their families. Some faces looked tired, some anxious, and some hopeful. At the center, the piano awaited her. Lila approached it slowly, her small hands brushing over the smooth, cool keys. She sat down, her heart racing, and glanced at the audience. Their eyes were on her, waiting, and a hush fell across the room. She took a deep breath and let her fingers touch the keys lightly. She began with a simple melody, just as she had been asked. The notes were soft, almost hesitant, like a whisper in the room. But soon something remarkable happened. Lila's music started to carry more than just notes. It carried all the emotions she had felt in her life, the loneliness, the longing for her mother, the sadness of her childhood, and the hope that never left her heart. The audience was captivated. Parents held their children close, some with tears forming in their eyes. Children leaned forward in their seats, fascinated by the sound that seemed to tell a story without words. Lila played on, unaware of the effect her music was having. She closed her eyes and let the melody flow naturally, letting her feelings guide her hands. The simple melody became a journey. Every note seemed to express a part of Lila's life, her struggles and her dreams. Her small hands moved with a grace that surprised even her. She forgot about the audience, the lights, and the room. In that moment, it was just her, the piano, and the hope that her music could somehow touch her mother's heart. As she continued, the room seemed to transform. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, and every listener felt a connection to the story she was telling through her music. Some wiped tears from their eyes quietly, while others held their breath, completely absorbed. The simple melody had grown into something profound, carrying the weight of love and longing in every note. When the last note lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence. Then, slowly, the room erupted in soft applause, some standing, some wiping tears. Lila opened her eyes, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She hadn't realized how deeply she had poured herself into the performance. Her heart was racing, but a warmth spread through her, a feeling that what she had done mattered. Afterward, the adults who had invited her approached with smiles that seemed almost proud. "Lila, that was beautiful," one said. "You played with your heart, and everyone could feel it." Another added, "Your music reached people in ways words never could." Lila's eyes shone, not with pride, but with something deeper, a quiet satisfaction, a sense that she had done something meaningful, something that might matter more than she could imagine. She thought again of her mother and hoped, more than ever, that somehow her music could reach her, even across the distance. That night, back at the orphanage, Lila replayed the melody in her mind. She didn't just remember the notes. She remembered the feeling of the audience listening, the way their emotions mirrored hers. She realized that music was not just a companion. It was a bridge, a way to reach hearts, to heal, to connect, and to offer hope. From that day on, the simple melody she had played became a part of her identity. It was a reminder that even small acts, when filled with love and sincerity, could touch lives in ways that were beyond imagination. Lila went to bed that night with a sense of quiet fulfillment, her heart still beating with hope, unaware that her performance had already set events into motion that could change her mother's life forever. The following days were filled with anticipation for Lila. Word of her performance had spread quietly within the orphanage and among a few people in the city who were connected to children's events. She noticed the staff watching her with a mix of curiosity and admiration, as if they expected something extraordinary from her. Lila herself felt a growing pressure inside, but it was not fear this time. It was purpose. She realized that her music had a power she had never fully understood, a power to reach hearts and change moments into something meaningful. In the afternoons, she would sit at the piano, playing her simple melody repeatedly, exploring the emotions behind every note. She experimented with the pace, the softness, the crescendos, and even the small pauses that could make the audience lean forward and listen closer. Each time she played, she imagined her mother listening, and that thought gave her the courage to push further, to let her feelings pour out without restraint. The music was no longer just a skill or a hobby. It had become her voice. Then one morning, the caretaker approached her with a gentle urgency. "Lila, there is someone here to see you," she said. Lila followed her to the front of the orphanage and saw a man standing with a warm smile, holding a small envelope. He introduced himself as part of a charity organization that supported sick children and families. "We heard about your performance," he said. "The music you played touched many hearts, and we would love to help you in a bigger way." Lila felt a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She did not understand how a simple melody she had played quietly could have such an impact. The man explained that the charity was organizing an event to raise awareness and support for families with children in critical conditions, and they believed her music could inspire hope. Lila hesitated, unsure if she could perform again, but she nodded, trusting the feeling in her heart. As the day of the next event approached, Lila practiced diligently. She stayed longer at the piano than usual, experimenting with every note, feeling the weight of responsibility. This time, the audience would be larger, with parents and children who were dealing with illnesses, and some of them might be struggling to find hope. Lila understood that her music could offer more than sound. It could offer comfort, a brief escape, and a sense of connection in a world that often felt heavy and unfair. The event hall was decorated with soft lights and banners promoting hope and care for children. Volunteers moved quietly, preparing chairs and welcoming families. Lila stepped into the room and felt her heart race. She had performed once before, but this felt different. The eyes of the families, filled with both worry and expectation, were now on her. She took a deep breath and approached the piano, her fingers brushing over the keys as if greeting an old friend. She could feel the warmth of the people around her, and a quiet determination settled in her chest. She began to play the simple melody she had learned to cherish. This time, however, she added something deeper, small touches of her own emotion, drawn from her memories, her longing for her mother, and her empathy for the children sitting in front of her. The music filled the room softly at first, and then grew with a gentle intensity, carrying her feelings across the hall. She could see parents closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them, and children leaning forward, captivated by the sound. The melody started to tell a story without words. Each note reflected Lila's journey, the loneliness of the orphanage, the hope she carried for her mother, and the love that never left her heart. She didn't think about making the music perfect or flawless. Instead, she focused on letting the emotions guide her fingers, letting the piano speak the words she could not. The audience responded instinctively. Some wiped tears from their eyes, while others held hands with their children, sharing the quiet moment of connection. At one point, Lila noticed a small girl in the front row holding her mother's hand tightly. The girl looked worried, with eyes full of concern and fear. Lila felt a surge of empathy and allowed the music to flow even more freely, letting the melody express both sadness and hope. It was as if the piano had become a bridge, carrying feelings between her and the people in the room, connecting hearts across experiences they could not share through words alone. Time seemed to stretch and compress at once. The simple melody that Lila had practiced countless times now seemed to transform into something much larger than her own life. She was telling a story not only of her own struggles but of all the children and families present, of all the unspoken fears, the silent prayers, and the hope that lingered even in difficult times. Her music became a reflection of the room itself, and the energy of the audience, though quiet, amplified the emotion, creating a space of shared humanity. When she reached the final notes, there was a profound silence. The music lingered in the air, almost as if it were reluctant to leave, carrying with it every hope, every tear, every heartbeat that had been touched. Slowly, the room erupted into soft applause, some standing, some wiping away tears, some simply smiling with relief and warmth. Lila opened her eyes, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. She had given everything she had, and yet, in that giving, she felt replenished. After the performance, the organizers approached her. "Lila, what you just did was incredible," one said. "Your music has reached people in ways that words cannot. You've given them hope, comfort, and a sense of understanding that is rare and precious." Lila nodded quietly, feeling a swell of pride mixed with humility. She knew she had not performed for recognition or praise, but the acknowledgement reminded her that her music could indeed touch lives in meaningful ways. As she returned to the orphanage that evening, Lila reflected on the day. She realized that music was more than a melody or a series of notes. It was a language that could carry emotion, heal hearts, and inspire courage. She had felt the power of her own feelings being shared, amplified, and returned to her through the audience's reactions. The experience strengthened her understanding that even the simplest actions, when done with sincerity and love, could create ripples far beyond what anyone might expect. That night, as she lay in her small bed, Lila held one of her mother's letters close to her chest. She could feel the connection even more strongly now, imagining that somehow, through her music and through the hope she shared, her mother might feel the same warmth and love that filled the room that afternoon. Lila closed her eyes, letting the memories of the audience and the melody fill her dreams. She knew that her journey was just beginning and that her music would continue to be a voice for those who needed comfort, for those who were struggling, and for the one person she loved more than anyone in the world. The day of the next performance arrived with a quiet excitement that lingered in the air. Lila woke earlier than usual, her heart pounding not from fear but from anticipation. The memory of the last event stayed with her. The way the audience had reacted, the warmth she had felt when her music had reached people's hearts. Today, however, the stakes felt higher. The event was larger, with more families and children who were struggling with serious illnesses. Lila understood that her music could be a source of comfort for them, and she felt a deep responsibility to give her best. She practiced in the morning, her fingers gliding over the piano keys as she refined the melody she had learned to cherish. She played slowly at first, letting the notes breathe, and then added touches of emotion she had never dared to express before. Every pause, every soft trill, carried the weight of her heart and the hope that her mother could somehow hear it, wherever she was. As she played, she imagined the room filled with children and families, each note touching their hearts, lifting their spirits even for a moment. When she arrived at the hall, she saw the volunteers setting up the chairs and decorations with care. The lighting was gentle, casting a warm glow that made the space feel inviting and safe. Families were arriving, some with worried faces, some carrying the fatigue of long days and nights spent caring for their children. Lila watched quietly, her heart swelling with empathy. She understood that her music could not change their struggles, but it could offer a moment of peace, a reminder of hope and love. Lila approached the piano, her small hands resting on the keys. The room fell silent as the audience noticed her. She looked out at the faces before her, parents holding children, children holding parents' hands, eyes filled with expectation, worry, and a glimmer of hope. The hush in the room was different this time. It was heavier, filled with anticipation. Yet there was also a quiet trust, as if the audience knew that something special was about to happen. She took a deep breath and began to play. The melody was soft at first, gentle as a whisper, but gradually it grew with more intensity. Each note was infused with her feelings, the loneliness of her own childhood, the longing for her mother, and the empathy she felt for the families before her. The music was no longer just a simple tune. It had become a story, a conversation between hearts, a bridge that connected her world with theirs. Parents closed their eyes, letting the music carry their thoughts and worries away for a while. Some children leaned forward, fascinated by the sound, their small faces reflecting the comfort and warmth the melody offered. Lila played with her eyes closed, feeling the room respond, feeling the subtle changes in energy as the music moved from one emotion to another. It was as if the room itself was breathing with her, every note echoing the unspoken feelings of everyone present. At one point, she noticed a boy with a fragile frame, sitting quietly in the front row. His eyes were wide, watching her intently. Lila felt a wave of compassion and allowed the music to grow softer, almost like a lullaby, comforting him without words. She imagined the boy feeling safe and understood, if only for a few moments, through the simple melody she created. Her heart swelled with a mixture of sadness and hope, knowing that her music could carry such emotion. The melody took unexpected turns, moments of hesitation followed by bursts of passion, reflecting the complexity of life itself. Lila's fingers moved with confidence, guided not just by skill but by empathy, by the desire to reach out and touch hearts in a way that only music could. She felt herself letting go of control, allowing the piano to speak her emotions fully, trusting that the audience would understand the story she was telling. As the performance continued, the audience became immersed in the sound. Some whispered soft words of gratitude to their children. Some clutched hands, some closed their eyes, letting the music heal parts of their hearts that had been heavy with worry. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of shared humanity, a moment where everyone, regardless of their struggles, felt connected through the purity of Lila's music. When the final note rang out, there was a profound silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, savoring the lingering sound. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, gentle at first and then stronger, filled with emotion and admiration. Some stood, some wiped away tears, some simply smiled, feeling lighter and more hopeful than they had in days. Lila opened her eyes, her chest rising and falling rapidly, overwhelmed by the energy and the warmth she felt from the audience. She realized that her music had truly reached them, touching hearts in a way words never could. After the performance, the organizers approached her with expressions of awe. "Lila, your music is remarkable," one said softly. "You have a gift that goes beyond talent. It carries your heart and connects with everyone who hears it." Another added, "You've offered comfort, hope, and strength today. That is something very rare." Lila nodded quietly, feeling both humbled and grateful. She had not played for praise or recognition, but hearing that her music could inspire hope and comfort others filled her with a quiet pride. Back at the orphanage that evening, Lila replayed the melody in her mind. She could feel the reactions of the audience, the subtle shifts in energy, the moments of quiet connection. She understood that her music had a power she had not fully realized before. A power to reach across the distance, to touch hearts, and perhaps even to help her mother in ways she could not yet see. The thought made her smile softly and gave her a renewed sense of purpose. That night, as she lay in bed clutching one of her mother's letters, Lila felt a deep sense of calm and fulfillment. She had poured her heart into the performance and had given something meaningful to people who needed it. The simple melody that had once been a private comfort had become a tool for connection and hope. She closed her eyes, imagining her mother feeling the same warmth and love that had filled the room, and drifted into sleep with a heart full of hope, unaware that her music had already begun to create a ripple of change that would soon reach far beyond the walls of the orphanage. The morning of the next event dawned with a calm that contrasted the excitement building inside Lila. She awoke early, the sun just peeking through her small window, casting soft light over her room. Today felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, not of fear, but of anticipation. Lila had performed before, and each time she grew more confident, yet she knew that today was special. The audience would include people who might be in deep distress, families who were struggling with illness, and children who needed more than just entertainment. They needed comfort, hope, and a reason to smile. Lila dressed in her simplest outfit, one that allowed her to move freely at the piano. She carried with her the letters from her mother, tucking them gently into her bag. They had always been a source of strength, and today, she felt she needed that strength more than ever. The caretaker walked alongside her to the venue, offering quiet words of encouragement. "Remember, Lila, just be yourself. Play with your heart, and everything else will follow." The venue was larger than any Lila had performed in before. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the room. Rows of chairs were filled with families and children, some leaning on each other for support, some with eyes full of worry, others with small smiles of hope. Volunteers moved quietly around the edges, ensuring everything was in place, while Lila took in the scene with a mixture of awe and determination. She approached the piano, her small hands resting on the keys. The room went silent as everyone noticed her presence. Lila felt a deep connection to the people before her, sensing their unspoken feelings, their fears, and their hope. She took a deep breath and let her fingers find the keys. The simple melody she had practiced countless times began softly, almost like a whisper in the quiet room. As she played, the music started to carry more than notes. Each chord expressed emotion, longing, love, hope, and resilience. Lila poured all her feelings into the performance, thinking of her mother, of the children and families in the room, and of the journey she had taken to reach this moment. Her hands moved gracefully over the piano, sometimes pausing to emphasize a feeling, sometimes speeding slightly as her emotions guided her. The audience was captivated, holding their breath, feeling the story unfold without words. Parents closed their eyes, letting the music reach into their hearts. Children leaned forward, listening intently, some gently swaying to the rhythm. Lila could see the subtle changes in the room, the soft smiles, the tears forming, the hands held tighter. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of shared humanity, a silent understanding that the music was speaking to everyone in its own unique way. Lila had become more than a performer. She had become a bridge, connecting hearts and offering comfort without speaking a single word. Midway through the performance, a woman in the audience, who had been sitting quietly with her child, approached one of the volunteers after the first set of notes. She explained that her child's condition required urgent attention, and she had been struggling to find the means to provide proper care. The volunteer listened intently and nodded, promising to do everything possible to help. As the music continued, Lila remained unaware of the small but significant impact her performance was having. Every note she played was reaching far beyond the walls of the hall. The melody evolved naturally, sometimes gentle, sometimes strong, reflecting the depth of emotion in the room. Lila let her own feelings guide her, thinking of the struggles she had faced as an orphan, the love she carried for her mother, and the hope she wanted to send to the families present. The audience responded instinctively, some leaning back in relief, others leaning forward in awe, feeling the weight of the emotion that flowed through the music. Lila noticed a small boy in the front row, looking tired and fragile, yet his eyes sparkled as he listened. She allowed the melody to soften, almost like a lullaby, reaching him directly. She imagined him feeling safe and comforted, even if only for a brief moment, and that thought gave her strength to continue. Her music became a channel, connecting her heart to theirs, turning the simple piano into a vessel for hope and care. As the performance progressed, volunteers began quietly taking notes of families who might need urgent help, inspired by the atmosphere and the way the music had touched everyone present. They understood that this was more than a concert. It was a call to action, a reminder of the importance of compassion and support. Lila's melody had created a ripple effect that extended beyond the hall, reaching the ears and hearts of people who were in a position to make a difference. Finally, Lila reached the last notes, holding them just long enough for the room to absorb the full weight of her performance. The silence that followed was heavy but filled with meaning, as if the entire audience was reflecting on the emotions they had just experienced. Slowly, the applause began, gentle at first and then growing louder, filled with tears, smiles, and gratitude. Lila opened her eyes, her chest rising and falling quickly. She had poured every ounce of her emotion into the music, and now, she could feel the impact it had made. After the performance, the organizers approached her, speaking in hushed, reverent tones. "Lila, your music has done something incredible," one said. "It has reached people in ways words never could. You've inspired hope, comfort, and courage." Another added, "Thanks to your performance, we have been able to help families who needed urgent support. Your simple melody has made a real difference." Lila nodded quietly, her heart full. She had not played for recognition or reward, but hearing that her music had caused positive change filled her with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Back at the orphanage, Lila lay in bed, holding one of her mother's letters close to her chest. She could still feel the presence of the families, the children, and the parents who had been touched by her music. She realized that the melody she had once played for herself had grown into something much larger, something that could reach across distances and circumstances to bring comfort, hope, and even practical help. That thought made her heart swell with quiet pride and fulfillment. As she drifted to sleep, Lila imagined her mother hearing the melody, feeling the love and care she had poured into it. She understood that her music was more than a gift. It was a lifeline, a way to connect hearts, and a reminder that even the simplest acts of love and sincerity could create change. Unbeknownst to her, the ripple she had started that day would soon reach her mother in a way that no letter, no word, and no distance could ever match. Lila closed her eyes, her heart full of hope, unaware that the life-saving impact of her music was already beginning to take shape. The morning light spilled softly into the orphanage as Lila woke with a quiet sense of anticipation. The events of the past performances still lingered in her mind. The warmth of the audience, the emotion she had poured into the piano, and the knowledge that her music had touched hearts in ways she could hardly understand. Today, she felt a sense of calm, a quiet certainty that something important was about to happen. She dressed simply and carried her mother's letters close to her, feeling their comfort like a gentle embrace. When she arrived at the hall for her final performance in this series, she noticed a different energy. Volunteers and organizers moved with purpose, yet the atmosphere was calm and welcoming. Families were being guided gently to their seats, and children looked around with curiosity, some holding onto parents' hands, others gripping small toys for comfort. Lila felt the weight of her responsibility but also a growing strength. She understood that her music was not just entertainment. It was a message of hope, a bridge of love, and a source of comfort. As she approached the piano, the audience fell silent. Lila rested her hands lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. She took a deep breath and began to play. The simple melody she had perfected over time started softly, almost like a gentle whisper that invited the listeners into her world. Slowly, the notes gained depth, carrying with them emotion, longing, and hope. Lila's hands moved gracefully, guided not just by skill, but by the empathy and love she held inside. The audience was captivated. Parents closed their eyes, feeling the music speak to their hearts. Children leaned forward, mesmerized by the sound. Lila noticed a few of the families she had seen at previous events, some with faces showing fatigue and worry, and she let the melody embrace them with comfort. The piano became her voice, expressing feelings that could not be said aloud, reaching deep into hearts and lifting spirits even in a room heavy with challenges. As she played, a group of volunteers began quietly organizing support for families who needed urgent help. They moved with care, ensuring that those who required medical assistance or financial aid were noted, inspired by the atmosphere Lila's music had created. Unseen by her, her simple melody had already begun changing lives, providing hope and opening paths for action. Each note she played carried more than sound, it carried possibility. Lila continued, letting the music flow naturally, sometimes soft and reflective, other times strong and assertive, reflecting the emotions she felt and imagined in the hearts of her listeners. She thought of her mother, of the distance between them, and of the hope she carried for her well-being. Each chord was a silent message, a prayer in sound, reaching across the unknown spaces separating them. She allowed herself to be fully present, surrendering to the music, letting it guide her and the room in a shared moment of connection. Parents in the audience felt a wave of relief and calm as they listened, their children leaning into them for comfort. Some quietly wept, others smiled through tears, feeling understood and supported in a way that words could not achieve. The energy in the room was quiet but profound, a shared understanding born from emotion and empathy. Lila's simple melody had become a universal language, speaking directly to hearts and offering something that transcended language and circumstance. Near the end of the performance, one of the volunteers approached a family whose child's condition had been critical. Arrangements had already been made for urgent medical support and resources to reach them quickly. Lila remained unaware of this. Yet every note she played was intertwined with unseen acts of compassion that her music had inspired. She continued, allowing the final moments of her performance to be filled with hope, love, and healing, unconsciously becoming a catalyst for change. As the last note lingered in the air, the audience sat in a moment of silence, absorbing the emotion and meaning carried by the melody. Slowly, applause began, gentle at first, then growing louder and stronger. Tears flowed freely from some, others clapped softly, some simply smiled, feeling lighter and hopeful. Lila opened her eyes, her heart full of fulfillment. She had shared her deepest feelings, and in doing so, she had reached hearts in ways she could never have imagined. After the performance, the organizers approached her, their expressions a mixture of admiration and gratitude. "Lila, your music has done more than touch hearts. It has created change," one said. "Families who needed help have received support because of this event. Your simple melody has saved lives." Another added, "You've given comfort, hope, and love in a way that only music can. You have a gift, and you have used it beautifully." Lila nodded quietly, feeling humility and pride intertwined. She had not played for recognition, but hearing that her music had saved lives and inspired hope filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. Later, back at the orphanage, Lila clutched one of her mother's letters close to her chest. She reflected on the journey she had taken, from a quiet, lonely child to a young girl whose music could touch hearts, offer comfort, and even change lives. She realized that her simple melody, born from her own longing and love, had become a force for good in the world. That thought made her smile softly, filling her with warmth and hope. Days later, a letter arrived that would forever change Lila's life. It was from her mother, who had received the medical attention she desperately needed thanks to the efforts inspired by Lila's performances. The letter was filled with gratitude, love, and hope, and spoke of the miraculous recovery she had experienced. Lila read it slowly, feeling tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. She had not only reached her mother through her music but had played a part in saving her life. The orphanage staff noticed the change in Lila. She moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes brighter, her spirit more resilient. She had discovered that even a single melody, when played with love and sincerity, could create ripples that extended far beyond her imagination. Her music had become more than a personal solace. It was a force that could heal, inspire, and connect lives. Lila continued to play, both in the orphanage and at community events, knowing the impact her music could have. She understood now that her gift was not just for herself, but for the world, a way to spread hope and love wherever it was needed. Each note she played carried the memory of her journey, the love for her mother, and the connection she had made with countless hearts along the way. Her story spread quietly through the city, inspiring others to listen more deeply, to offer help where it was needed, and to recognize the power of compassion and empathy. Lila remained humble, focusing on her music and the joy it brought to others. Yet inside, she knew that her heart had expanded, filled with the understanding that even the simplest acts, when guided by love, could create miracles. As she sat at her piano one evening, playing the melody that had started it all, Lila felt a profound sense of completion and hope. She thought of her mother, healthy and smiling, and of the lives she had touched. The music flowed effortlessly from her hands, carrying not only sound but the story of her heart, her struggles, and her triumph. In that moment, Lila understood the true power of her gift. and she knew that the melody would continue to echo through the hearts of everyone who heard it. A timeless reminder of hope, love, and the extraordinary impact one small heart can have on the world.